Succession's easily the best TV show this side of Breaking Bad, but you know it's based on something in real life? The King Lear play by Shakespeare. But if there's a family it's based on in real life, it's the Murdochs. But okay, look, it's a composite story based on a bunch of different families and stories and plays over the years. There's a succession battle playing out in Canada to this day, right now. The Stronachs, their story's just like Succession, except instead of it being Canadians invading the US with a business empire, it's Austrians invading Canada with a business empire. You know, it's got all the twists, turns, and wacky antics. They're all there, but sometimes truth can be stranger than fiction. Sometimes life imitates art. Frank Stronach, the Logan Roy of this story, was founded in 1932 by two hardcore communist parents. He was born with the name Franz Stronach. I think he was Croat or something, but he was Austrian, okay? His childhood was pretty meager, but by the 1950s, he was ready to move to the greatest country on earth, Canada. And so in 1954, that's exactly what he did. In 1957, he actually opened his first business called Multimatic. It was a tool and die shop located just a few streets down the road from here, actually. They made car parts. Anyway, yada, yada, yada. 1990s, Frank, along with Multimatic, now called Magna, have expanded into...
What's up? What are you doing?
I'm just looking at the founders of Magna. You ever hear of them?
No.
Well, they're an auto part company, one of the biggest in the world, but they're not just in auto parts. They're in a bunch of other stuff too, like horse racing, a horse breeding, horse training, a horse pellet feed, horse betting, a horse tracks, horse World Cup. Did I mention horses yet?
Is that?
Yeah, the queen of horse girls. The queen. Also horse TV, dog racing tracks, and finally something not horses, cattle farms, golf and country clubs, an Austrian soccer academy, Rooney's Bar in Toronto, defunct business magazine called Vista, a failed bid for MP of York Simcoe under the Liberals, so he was a libtard. A think tank too, an annual symposium called As Prime Minister I Would... A castle, theme parks. There was also an Austrian themed energy drink with the slogan, keeps you yodeling all night long. Aerospace, defense contracting, Canadaville, a town to house survivors of Hurricane Katrina, software, industrial parts, electric bikes, horse race events, simulcasting technology and infrastructure, telebetting and internet betting on horses, pari-mutuel gambling ring, slot machines, casinos, horse race totalizers, the electronic scoreboard things, fucking airline apparently, real estate, a Maryland catering service, over a dozen websites all chronicling the same goddamn life story. How many do you need? There's just so many ventures to list. I'm sure I'm forgetting so many, but just...
Wow. Sure is a weird story.
And by the 1990s, Magna had a market cap of $9 billion. Holy shit. Anyway, 20 years later, Magna still had a market cap of $9 billion. What happened? Well, you know, Magna lacked focus, because as you can tell, Frank was fucking around a lot with his side quests, and also he was paying himself $60 million a year for the pleasure of his mismanagement. A lot of horsing around, I guess you could say. They can't get rid of him, though, since by luck of his class of shares, he structured it so each one gets 500 votes per share. Back in the day, there was a rite of passage for business journalists in Toronto to actually go down to Magna International's earnings reports. The following exchange allegedly would always unfold. Reporter in rumpled suit. I don't know why they mentioned the rumpled suit. Why should you get 500 votes for every share you own? Frank Stronach says. The shareholders voted for it. Reporter, rumpled suit. Why do you deserve $60 million in pay? Stronach replied, I should get more. You know what? Maybe you could have it. But September 2010, okay? Frank sells off Magna shares for $870 million. Frank's no longer the majority shareholder, sure. Magna's free though. That's the key. And then, as you can see, it went on to triple in the next 3 years. Call it the anti-Frank factor. By 2012, Frank, free from Magna, now gets to found a right-wing populist party in Austria. He calls it Team Stronach. He's 81, by the way. But you know, their key positions for Team Stronach includes leaving the Eurozone, issuing a new Austrian euro, walking back on ditching the euro, but still issuing a new Austrian euro for some reason. Lukewarm on immigration, 25% flat tax though, goddamn, lowering national debts, cutting bureaucracy, ending conscription, electoral reform, and body positivity. What? Tragically, less whimsical than his business ventures overall. Team Stronach went on to get 5 MPs to defect to them at the start, earning official party status. Endorsed by Bill Clinton and Larry King. I don't know if they got much pull there. Maybe Bill Clinton. But then he won over 10% in multiple state-level elections. They became the 5th largest party in Austria, national parliament. And then October 2023, you could see Frank talking here in Austria. Magna founder Frank Stronach reinvents himself as a political rebel. And he was saying, I'm going to be here forever. I love Austria. And then 2 weeks later, Canadian billionaire Stronach to end foray into Austrian politics. Stronach, self-stylized anti-establishment politician, lost ground after an embarrassing series of television debates in which he warned of the danger of Chinese troops marching into Austria and voiced support for the death penalty. Amid disarray in his Team Stronach party in the wake of the election and multiple firings of top party officials, the founder of car parts firm Magna International and Austrian parliamentarians said he had enough. A party dissolved in 2017. Very unfortunate. Anyway, on to the succession crisis. Since this is a family affair, I'm going to root this story in the Stronach family tree. Frank married a high elf in 1964. The high elf is now, unfortunately, passed, so rest in peace. But anyway, married in 1964 and got straight to business. Frank and their first child came quickly, the first child spawning in 1966. Unfortunately, it was a girl. And so they named her Belinda and tried again, quickly producing a proper heir in 1968 named Andrew. Unfortunately, Andrew inherited Frank's autism, but not his extroversion. Andrew ended up falling in love with agriculture, marrying a commoner, and had a daughter named Selena around the year 2000. I couldn't find a photo of Selena online, or actually that's a lie, I did find a photo, but it was just so hard to track down that I realized maybe it's best I just don't include it. You know, there's a reason it's hard to find. She's not a public person. But anyway, I think Andrew ended up separating from the commoner and moved to the county of Prince Edward Island. Not to be confused with the province of Prince Edward Islands. Belinda, though, she was destined for greatness. Belinda was an athlete, popular, hardworking, and Frank took quickly to grooming her for the throne instead. They appeared together constantly. Frank was always praising her beauty and her genius, and after graduating high school, she went to York University for a year, but then she ended up dropping out, opting to work for Magna instead. Frank himself dropped out around age 14, so he was always valuing character and work ethic over education, so this was no issue for Frank. By the age of 22, Frank appointed Belinda to the board of directors for Magna. Yeah, rather young, sure, but don't worry, the board is mostly a vestigial organ these days, so it's not like it matters. But most disagreed. Imagine being some VP plus tier employee at Magna and seeing the owner's daughter leapfrog your decades of work experience at the age of 22. I'd be pissed too. Even worse, she ended up shacking up with the VP of Ops, and he was elevated to CEO for the trouble. This VP of Ops turned son-in-law slash CEO was named Donald Walker, and they went on to have two kids together. Frank Walker, a DJ, and Nicole Walker, a horse girl, and they divorced after 5 years of marriage. She also went on to marry a Norwegian speed skater, 4x gold medalist, but they never had any kids, so that doesn't matter. By the early 2000s, investors were fed up with Frank, and I mean, frankly, they were investing in an auto parts company, not a horse company, so I don't blame them. But they forced him to sign an agreement forbidding him from any further horse or otherwise non-auto part related investment activities, and this finally caused his attention to turn to succession planning. Now, Frank established a family trust and called it the Stronach Family Trust. He loves naming things Stronach X, and his family was beneficiaries and him the super trustee. In 2001, Frank decided Belinda's got enough experience to take over as CEO for Magna, and then she bailed 3 years later in 2004 to throw her hat in the ring for the federal Conservative Party leadership race. You know, interestingly enough, Belinda's actually got a surprisingly long history of being involved in Canadian politics. Allegedly, Belinda was the secret architect of the modern Conservative Party of Canada. They used to be two different parties. This caused vote splitting. Word on the streets that Belinda was the one who got the two Conservative parties together and started and mediated the conversation around reunification. You know, speaking of hosting, Belinda also threw a party once where our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, met his future wife and mother of his kids, the one who left him for an Ottawa doctor. Man, imagine stealing the Prime Minister's wife. God damn. Anyway, did I mention Belinda was named in Time Magazine's list of the world's 100 most influential people at one point? And number 2 in Fortune's top 100 most powerful women in business. Anyway, Belinda went on to lose her leadership bid to the next Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper. She was accused of being a manufactured candidate at the time, and what sealed the deal for her defeat was a moment where, to combat the betrayal, she made a big show of throwing away the script at the leadership convention. This was undercut moments later when people noticed she was covertly reading off of cue cards. God damn it, Belinda. After losing the Conservative Party leadership race to Stephen Harper, she decided to cross the aisle and join the Liberals. Her timing was malicious, though, as she did it during a vote which would have brought down the Liberal government and triggered an election, as she was awarded a cabinet position for this betrayal, becoming Minister of HR and Minister responsible for Democratic Renewal, whatever the fuck that means. Anyway, the Libtards lost in 2006, and Belinda said goodbye to politics a year later returning to Magna. By 2010, when Magna bought out most of the Stronach shares, Frank was able to finally go hog wild with spending. He decided to set up a hog farm in Florida for one. Terrible climate and soil to be doing that in, but fuck it, it's Frank after all. The following year, Magna was excited to return to pure play status and offered to buy the rest of Frank's stakes in exchange for offloading all the eclectic assets he's accumulated over the years. The wealth and these assets were placed within a newly formed legal structure under the Stronach Group, his new company, which also has the Stronach Family Trust. The web of entities wrapped up in all this is pretty opaque, but we do get some insight into the trust part via this org chart shown in a filing from 2007 where Magna looks like was trying to get a foreign investor. Who's this foreign investor? Oh, yeah, if you're wondering who Russian Machines is, that's an automaker in Russia. Oh, it's Gaz, GAZ. Yeah. God, I knew I recognized them. They're famous for the Gaz kind of car. I always was more of a red Skoda guy when I played DayZ, but that's just me. Now, who owns Russian Machines? Oh, Basic Element. Who owns Basic Element? Who runs that? Oh, Mr. Oleg Deripaska. Why does that sound familiar? Wait a minute. Well, I mean, I really shouldn't be judging who people do business with. Anyway, stuck with all of the horse assets, Belinda was forced to join the family and finally become a horse girl herself. She spearheaded the charge in making horse racing cool again, via persuading dozens of celebrities to start attending horse races. I mean, just looking here, here's her with Post Malone, Pharrell, a gay man, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, you get the picture from the pictures. All of Belinda's horsing around, though, did pay off since she ended up doubling revenue in 5 years, and especially off of that big of a number to begin with, like, that's actually a very good job. She should be proud of that. And Frank should be, too. Frank should be very proud of her for that. And yet, the guy got all butthurt about it. At the age of 85, no less. My God, this man is still at the complete mercy of his ego at 85 years old. Just fucking embarrassing. Frank became increasingly obsessed with his hobby farm there, specifically obsessed with pouring more money into it. Take this 12-story bronze statue of a Pegasus stomping a dragon to death. Ran 12x over budget, nearly 60 mil. And the second one's still stuck rotting away in a warehouse in China to this day, by the way. Seeing the amount of spending for what it was, wasteful, Belinda sent a man named Alon Osip to convince Frank to rein in the spending. Alon Osip was Frank's right-hand man. Originally a tax lawyer before Frank offered him an EVP spot at Magna, Alon negotiated the Magna buyouts back in the day and was made CEO of the Stronach Group in exchange, and given 5% equity on all assets owned by the Stronach Group outside of the family trust. Many credit Alon for much of the Stronach wealth overall, and Frank spends New Year's Eve at Alon's house every year during this era. Alon was Frank's protege back in the day, and given the rising tensions between father and daughter, Alon was seen as a perfect neutral party to help mediate the conflict between the two. And for a while, he was. As time went on, though, Alon's legion slowly shifted from the old guard to the new, and this was where the succession crisis started. When Frank had his Austrian political foray back in 2013, he resigned as super trustee and handed over the reins to Belinda's half of the family, with Nicole and Frank, the DJ, made temporary trustees. And Alon Osip was added as a trustee too. The crux of the legal drama to follow here was made during this trustee transfer. A set of undated documents declaring Nicole and Frank the DJ resign as trustees, and OG Frank be reappointed to his prior positions. Frank contends that these were made on his order, and with the intent that they become effective whenever Frank decides to return to the super trustee position. Belinda and Osip deny this, since if that were true, it would mean Frank resigned purely to avoid Austrian public disclosure compliance, which would be illegal. And so Belinda says the documents were made after Osip got paranoid, which lawyers are known to do, about the possibility of Belinda dying and just being left with Alon and her two kids as trustees. They claim Frank wasn't involved, and when Frank bailed on Austria shortly thereafter, he went right back to funneling money into his goddamn hobby farm. Frank claims to have assumed the documents were executed and he was back in charge by this point. Instead of correcting him, though, Belinda and Alon decided to sign every document he was signing so that he wouldn't notice he didn't actually have signing authority anymore. And by the end of 2016, $800 million goddamn dollars later, Belinda and Osip decided decided, fuck it, Frank has got to be cut off at this point. Osip went to deal with Frank, claiming that the Stronach group had a cash crunch. And when Frank put up a fight, Alon Osip told him to take it up with his daughter, since she was the one in charge. Frank tried to assert he was legally in charge, while Belinda and Osip claimed he wasn't. Frank ordered Belinda to fire Osip. Belinda was conflicted over whether to side with her father or her right-hand man, so she decided to compromise. She suspended Osip until things calmed down, and after a round of mediation, an agreement was reached. Frank would become chairman of his hobby farm, granted signing authority for all expenses under $1 million, and get $40 million in capex over the next 3 years. The agreement lasted less than a month. Frank immediately drafted plans that overran the budget. Belinda fired back by canceling his retail operation proposal and firing some of Frank's employees, taking over the hobby farm, shutting down the golf course, and sold the land at a discount. At a discount! That right there makes me want to side with Frank, because that's just an objective failure of fiduciary duty on behalf of Belinda. Like, seriously, Frank, for his part, allegedly cornered her kids and pressured them to sign over their trustee positions to him, cut off Belinda from bank funds, and also tried board shenanigans to regain power. So outside of Frank and Belinda's family, where did the rest of the Stronachs fall? All on the side of Frank. Alpha obviously sided with her husband, while Andrew and Selena also sided with Frank because Belinda was clearly prioritizing her own concerns over those of the Stronachs as a whole. In 2018, Belinda sent an offer to the rest of the family, dividing the trust by existing equity stakes and bifurcating the non-trust assets based on family involvement, with the horse racing and gambling assets to Belinda's side and the rest to the other side. Belinda would also pay Andrew a large sum of cash in exchange for this offer. This proposal went unanswered by all. The breaking point came when Belinda sold the family private jet, according to insiders at least. Frank hadn't flown commercial in over 40 years, one said. And so Frank fired the first shot in 2018. Frank's first shot was a nuclear bomb. October 2018, Frank's lawsuit, he attempts to absolutely sewer his daughter's reputation across 70 plus pages, saying Belinda and Alon, oh, by the way, Alon was getting sued in this, Belinda and Alon seriously neglected the business of the Stronach group and abused their positions of authority in order to conceal significant cash flow issues and to favor their own personal interests at the direct expense of other members of the Stronach family. He sought $520 million in damages and her side being ousted. November 2018. Andrew, Belinda's brother, also files a lawsuit, citing the same reasons as Frank's initial lawsuit, and that Belinda has enriched herself from the company in charge of the 23% ownership he has in the trust. Andrew was quoted as being more sad than mad, and just wanting more transparency after being ignored, which, I mean, if that is the case, I mean, like, how can you argue against that? January 2019. Wait, what's this? Oh my god. Is that Andrew's estranged wife from the top of the ropes? Oh my! Filing for divorce, she claims she was first dissuaded back in the day when they first separated after Frank intervened to tell her that she'd lose, but if she fired her lawyer, he would make sure that she and Selena were taken care of. After realizing there was a time limit for suing, she's asking for the judge to grant her an extension on her rights. I honestly haven't found any updates on this one beyond just the fact that this is happening. Oh yeah, also 2019, Belinda files her statement of defense against Frank's lawsuit and then countersues. Belinda's 217-page countersuit paints Frank as being in decline, and that his ill-conceived follies cost the company $850 million in losses, specifically pointing to examples such as his 12-story bronze statue of Pegasus stomping a dragon to death for $55 million. Frank is painted as a one-hit wonder, having failed in every venture besides Magna. February 2019 rolls around, and Selena files her own lawsuit, demanding that Belinda pay or reimburse Selena for personal expenses that have historically been paid or reimbursed on her behalf through trusts and /or the Stronach group. And so with Frank and Elf in Austria or Florida, Belinda and the kids elsewhere, and Andrew in Prince Edward County, Selena and her mom are the only ones living on Frank's gargantuan family compound, living in a 15,000 square foot manor, which has incomplete plumbing, loose wiring, unfinished walls, and no goddamn kitchen. Anyway, and as you can see here. Not much happens. But then August 2020, Frank and Belinda's side settle. Frank receives all agricultural and farm assets, horse breeding and stables, and all European assets in the Stronach group, which will be under a new entity. Meanwhile, Belinda gets to keep the Stronach group along with all other horse-related assets, the gambling, real estate, and related assets. Note here that Andrew and Selena are left out to dry. God damn. Anyway, silence for 4 goddamn years, but then 4 years later, June 2020, we're just chilling. Suddenly, Frank is arrested after 3 women come forward with claims that Frank has had his way with them unconsensually, and the number of women increases to 10 soon after. Alleged incidences range from as far back as 1977 to as recently as February of 2024, which he's 91, mind you. My God. June 2024, this all goes down. July 2024, Selena comes in, attempting to get things resolved since it's been dragging on for like 5 fucking years at this point. She files a request for any documents related to Frank's misconducts, and Belinda rebukes her. August of 2024, the judge dismisses the request for records as baseless and calls it a fishing expedition, which, I mean, maybe. The lawsuit's been dragging on for 5 years. Going fishing, fuck it. I think everyone in the court's been out to lunch this whole time. Oh, who cares if someone's going fishing? It's clearly the weekend here, okay? Nothing's happening. And then finally, for the love of Christ, September 2024, Andrew and Selena's lawsuits are settled out of court, or shortly before they're set to go to trial. I don't know what the hell was going on there. I hope it's a good resolution. So what do we learn here today? 1, succession planning is important. It's always important. It will literally ruin your life, your family's legacy, everything. Jesus, be careful. Always think of the incentives. 2, lawyers win again. And 3, Selena, hit me up. Now, off to the fucking glue factory.